Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of the Law and Ethics podcast with Paul Summerfield. In today's case, we have a pharmacist who decided to open up a online store selling PMEDs while he was suspended back in 2013. Between 2013 and 2014, he sold PMEDs online without proper checks and controls while being subject to interim order of suspension. So, Paul, tell us a bit more about this case and give us a bit more background into the pharmacist himself and what led to his suspension and what he was doing while suspended.
Okay, so basically what happened here was that there was a previous determination which was on an interim order basis. So basically what that means is that the GPHC had information, they needed to act upon it swiftly, and therefore they restricted the practice of this pharmacist for another matter. That lasted, in this case, this interim suspension, which is relevant to this case, that interim suspension was around about 3.5 years. What this pharmacist did in the meantime is they then set up an online pharmacy through eBay, and I believe it was Ebid as well. Used the title pharmacy within the marketing literature, used the title pharmacy when describing the products. Doing this when they were suspended, so they didn't have the right to practice at this point when they set up a pharmacy. They also didn't register the pharmacy with the General Pharmaceutical Council, so that's yet another factor we have to consider. The medicines that they sold were pharmacy-only medicines ranging from Optrex infected eyes, Senna tablets in packs of 100, Senecot liquid, and Dequidine, for a few examples that were given in the determination. Now that wouldn't be an issue, if you've set up a pharmacy, if it's online, if it's registered, you're registered, it's not an issue. However, in this case, it was an issue. This person wasn't entitled to practice as a pharmacist at all. So really, what we're looking at here is the selling of PMEDs without the required safety element, as in it's being sold by a pharmacist. But also in this case, there was a suggestion, and that suggestion was found, that there was a financial motivation for this as well. So that's a bit of a background to the case there. So if we move on to what was decided. So most of the allegations were found, proved. There was a little bit of to and froing at the beginning of the hearing, as frequently there is in relation to how the allegations had been worded or framed. And so when all this was sorted out, it moved on, the facts were found proved. The fitness to practice, the impairment of fitness to practice, was also found. But it was found because they believed, the committee believed that the public would expect a regulator to act. Now, when this came to being heard, some 5 years had passed, and of course the interim suspension had been removed. The pharmacist had practiced for 3 years without any further issues. However, because of the seriousness of the facts as they were then proved, the committee felt that they had to find impairment of fitness to practice so that they could act as the public would expect them to act. Now, setting out the case as we have done, you'd be expecting quite a severe and high sanction to be put on to this individual. So the committee discussed where, going through the sanctions in ascending order, whether to impose a warning, and they said that was inappropriate, whether to impose conditions of practice, and of course because of the dishonesty part, conditions of practice very, very rarely are placed on a practitioner when there's dishonesty proved. They then looked at the line between suspension and removal. Now, this is where this case gets quite interesting. What the committee decided was that there was no public protection now involved because of the length of time from the initial issues in 2014, 2015, all the way up to the hearing, which is in 2020. And the fact that this person had practiced for 3 years once the interim order of suspension had been removed and set to one side without any problems. There's a lot of testimonials as well regarding how well regarded this person was, how honest they were, how trustworthy they were, how much of an asset they were to the profession. So the committee decided that removal would be too harsh. So they then looked at suspension, which is the one below removal. What they then decided was, in relation to the suspension, that it should be a short suspension to send out a message that the behaviour was unacceptable. They toyed with the idea of a lengthy suspension, and this is quite an interesting element here. They decided that a lengthy suspension wouldn't really do anything in this case. They were very impressed with the level of insight that the practitioner had shown. They were very impressed with the testimonials. They said that the risk of repetition, there was no risk of repetition of this type of behaviour. So there's a declaratory message to be sent out. But they also said that by imposing a long period of suspension, it would act as a financial penalty as well. Now, from memory and from experience, this is one of the first times that a committee has actually stated this regarding suspension being equivalent to a financial penalty. So that's where I found that quite interesting. What they then decided was that the length of suspension should be 1 month, which is quite surprising when you think about the background of the case, but it goes to show how good testimonials, good insight, good remorse can actually be very beneficial and be instrumental in a fitness to practice hearing. And this is a prime example of that.
Yeah, in terms when I read through the case and I saw he was selling all these PMEDs online while he was suspended as well, and then when he said that he wasn't suspended and he didn't think that using the name pharmacy was anything serious because no one would take it seriously. There was a lot of issues with that. I thought, well, this could be a really lengthy sentence, and this guy could literally get struck off. But by the end of it, when you go through all the reasoning as to why they didn't take it serious, they didn't go for a more lengthy approach or a more harsher sentence. I was a bit surprised in basically the shortness of the whole thing.
Of course. And that's always something to bear in mind. There's a lot of fear around fitness to practice proceedings. Some of it's justified, some of it's not justified. In my personal experience representing registrants, a lot of registrants are reluctant to go and actively seek out testimonials because they don't want to look bad in the eyes of others. They don't want other people knowing what they've done. But that's part and parcel of insight, is if you've done something wrong, you put your hand up, you own up to it, And when you go and ask somebody for a reference or a testimonial, you actually say, this is the reason why I'm asking you. You tell them what's happened. And surprisingly enough, a lot of individuals are actually quite understanding when you tell them what's going on, and they'll still back you up. And a lot of registrants are very fearful of that.
It's a difficult one to approach someone and say, "Oh, can you give me testimonials?" So yeah, I mean, it goes to show you need to be open and honest about what you've done and the mistakes that you've made, and prove that you've actually changed from who you were before.
Of course. So I mean, looking at the standards and sort of just incorporating the standards in. So of course there was a lack of patient-centred care here. There wasn't effective communication, especially in the early stages. In relation to acting professionally, there wasn't in the early stages, setting up a pharmacy without being registered, selling medicines without a pharmacist who was able to practice. Again, that is not acting professionally. Speaking up when things go wrong, did this person speak up when things go wrong? It's clear from the determination that they didn't. But of course, that changed, so they did speak up when things went wrong because they started talking about it. They did act professionally, so they did act with honesty and openness, and they were trustworthy. And the testimonials showed that, but also by going and seeking the testimonials, that can be evidence in itself by being open and honest that you're acting professionally. So, again, as you were saying, it shows if you can turn your bad situation around and learn from it, it will stand you in good stead.
Yeah, absolutely, and this case is a perfect example. So I think that's the end of this case for this episode for today. On our next episode, we discuss a case of a pharmacist who decided to buy some clothes and then return them by changing the labels and make some extra money out of it. That's a really interesting case, that one. And there's some good history into that case as well. We'll really go into that case on our next episode. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.